determined to put money back in the pockets of working people. And that's why a Labour government would freeze council tax this year. No if, no but. Labour would freeze council tax next year. And we're going to freeze council tax next year. You could rip up that council tax bill because you would not pay a penny more than you paid last year. Yes, you heard it right. Not a penny more on your council tax.
But none of those pledges in our manifesto requires increases in council tax.
No, we're not planning to reform council tax.
This is what we would do in government. What is he going to do? What a Labour government would do and announce an immediate freeze in council tax bills. We're often asked the question, when you criticise the government, what would you do? Well, we're saying what we would do. We would freeze council tax.
Let me tell you something about the housing crisis that nobody ever talks about. If you live here in London, you're paying an estimated £216 in rent every single month due to the demand from immigration since 2001. That's £2,500 every year.
London is emptying out. December 27th, 2025. Not from war, not from disease, from rent. Average UK monthly private rents increased by 4.4% to £1,366 in the 12 months to November 2025. In London, renters are seeing rents 2.8% higher than November 2024, at an average price of £2,271. That's £27,252 per year, just for rent. The average PRS household is spending 35.3% of their income on rent, up from 33% in 2021-22. The typical tenant now spends £854 per month on rent, spending 40% of income on rent, minus widely regarded as the upper limit of affordability. On average, Londoners say they spend 42% of their personal monthly income on their rent or mortgage. The average tenant in London is spending 47.7% of their wages on housing. In some boroughs, it's worse. In 7 London boroughs, including Enfield, Haringey and Brent, tenants are forced to allocate at least half of their income to rent, with Enfield being the least affordable at 56%. 56% of gross income.
The incredible map on your screens right now shows census data of how many houses are occupied by those born overseas. There's estimated to be up to 900,000 households across England and Wales. And now this data, bear in mind, that's only from 2021 for the latest census data, so it's sure to be even higher than that.
Just to keep a roof overhead, and people are fleeing. Last year, 40% of renters moving home in London chose to leave the capital, up from just 28% a decade ago, equating to 90,370 households, with the numbers doubling since 2012. 1 in 4 say they may need to leave the capital in the next 12 months to find an affordable rent. But before we expose how Britain's capital has become financially uninhabitable for ordinary workers, let's acknowledge reality. Mainstream media won't tell you that a nursery assistant on £24,420 per year spends 49% of their income on rent, that in Westminster and Kensington it costs 75% and 73% of median London pay to rent a one-bedroom home, or that only 5% of London's private rental listings are affordable to households relying on local housing allowance. That's why we built British Front Media. Subscribe now for unfiltered coverage of Britain's housing catastrophe. Reason number 1. London rents have reached such catastrophic levels that essential workers now spend up to half their gross income just on housing, while landlords exit the market in record numbers. Spare room findings reveal Londoners earning the national living wage would need to work 63 hours per week to spend no more than 30% of their wages on housing costs. 63 hours per week, just to meet the 30% affordability threshold. Rents in the capital have risen over the past 5 years to £995 per month in Enable 3 2025, for an average room in a shared flat. A room, not a flat. A room. A gross salary of at least £39,804 per year is needed to affordably rent an average room in London at £995 per month. A nursery assistant on an average annual salary of £24,420 would spend 49% of their income on rent, while an ambulance driver earning £29,946 would spend 40%. Essential workers, nurses, ambulance drivers, nursery staff, teachers, spending half their income on rent. In Greater London, average advertised rents are now £2,712 per month. For single-let tenancies, that's £32,544 annually. London's house price-to-income ratio stands at 12.9, more than double that of many other UK cities. In every London borough, the average rent for a one-bedroom home on the private market is at least 1/3 of median pre-tax pay in London. The average cost for a one-bedroom home is the equivalent of almost half, 46%, the gross median pay in London. The least affordable boroughs are Westminster and Kensington and Chelsea, where it costs 75% and 73% respectively of the median London pay to rent a one-bedroom home on average. 75% of median pay for one bedroom in Westminster. Think about that mathematics. If you earn £40,000 per year, gross in London, mainers above median wage, and work in Westminster, you'd spend £30,000 annually just to rent a one-bedroom flat nearby. That leaves £10,000 gross, mainers about £8,000 after tax for everything else. Food, transport, council tax, utilities, clothes, everything, for an entire year. And while tenants drown, landlords flee. In July 2025, 22% of all the 8,006 newly listed homes for sale in inner London had been available to rent at some point in the last decade, a 10-year high. Research from Savills found that from 2021 to 2023, 45,000 rental properties in London were sold, with no new homes replacing them. The market is shrinking fastest in the most affordable areas, impacting millions of renters and pushing more people into homelessness. Reason number 2. Renters are fleeing London in unprecedented numbers, with 370 households leaving last year, and 1 in 4 saying they may need to leave in the next 12 months to find affordable rent. Last year, 40% of renters moving home in London chose to leave the capital, up from just 28% a decade ago. 40%. This equated to 90,370 households, with the numbers doubling since 2012. In total, just over 718,000 tenants have left over the last decade. 718,000 tenants gone from London. In 10 years, 62% of these were longer-term tenants, having moved into their home at least 4 years ago, not young professionals doing a year in London before moving on. Long-term residents, established Londoners, forced out by rent. The typical tenant doesn't tend to move far, with each of the top 10 local authorities that most tenants move to directly bordering London. Tandridge topped the list with more than 52% of tenants in the area moving from London, but increasingly they're going further. 38% are heading to the Midlands or the north of England, up from just 27% in 2019. 1 in 4 say they may need to leave the capital in the next 12 months to find an affordable rent. 25% of current tenants planning to leave within a year, all because rent has become unsustainable. Just 24% of London renters think there are enough suitable properties available in London for them to rent. A record 31% of those who bought a place outside the capital in 2024 were first-time buyers, snapping up 17,680 homes, a figure that has more than doubled since 2013. Many who climbed onto the first rung of the ladder were escaping from the capital's rental market. Why? Because lower mortgage rates mean that it is cheaper to buy than rent, although the salary and deposit required for a London home tend to make it difficult to remain in the city. So first-time buyers are buying outside London, using deposits saved while living with parents or sharing cramped flats, leaving the capital forever. Reason number 3, the affordability crisis has deteriorated so dramatically that wages have risen 30% while rents have risen 40% over 5 years, pushing rental affordability to its limits with no relief in sight. Average wages have risen by less than 30%, while rent has risen by 40% over the last 5 years, rent outpacing wages by 33%. Since May 2022, private rents have surged, outpacing average earnings growth. The price of new lets has risen by 21% in the last 3 years, dwarfing house prices that have increased by 4% over the same period. 21% rent increases, 4% house price increases. Renting has become more expensive than buying. The typical London renter spends close to half of their post-tax income on housing. Well over half of a renter's income is spent on basic living expenses, before other necessities such as food or transportation are considered, when household expenditures are factored in. 7 in 10 say their rent or mortgage payments have increased in the past 12 months, not some increased. 7 in 10, 70% of Londoners saw housing costs rise in 1 year. The most recent ONS statistics show average rents increased 4.4% annually to £1,422 a month in England, but London rents specifically are much higher at £2,271. With housing benefit frozen and universal credit rising by 1.7% in April 2025, people on low incomes are being locked out of the private rented sector, with many facing homelessness. Benefits rising 1.7%. Rents rising 4.4%. The gap widens every year. Research from London councils shows only 5% of London's private rental listings in the capital are affordable to households relying on local housing allowance. 5% of all rental listings affordable to people on housing benefit. That means 95% of London's rental market is completely inaccessible to anyone receiving housing support. More than 300,000 households in the city are on the social housing waiting list. 300,000 households waiting for social housing that doesn't exist. Trapped in a private rental market they cannot afford. Reason number 4. Rental supply is collapsing as landlords sell up en masse due to interest rate rises, regulatory changes, and deteriorating economics, making the crisis exponentially worse for tenants. From 2021 to 2023, 45,000 rental properties in London were sold, and no new homes replacing them. 45,000 rental homes gone from the market in 2 years. The market is shrinking fastest in the most affordable areas, not the expensive areas, the affordable ones, where people on lower incomes could actually find somewhere to live. In inner London, nearly a third of homes for sale, 31% are former rentals, which is almost 3 times the average across the rest of the country. 12% former rental properties flooding the sales market, being bought by homeowners, removed permanently from rental stock. With rental yields already lower in the capital, it will take a longer time for a significant premium over the risk-free rate to emerge. Why are landlords leaving? The new Renters' Rights Act coming in means landlords have more responsibilities, more paperwork, and more compliance than ever. Getting rid of Section 21 was the turning point. Minus, landlords can't ask tenants to leave without a valid reason anymore. Combined with interest rate rises from 0.1% in 2021 to 5.25% in 2023, landlords are facing tough decisions as to whether the arithmetic still works. And they've decided it doesn't, so they're selling. When landlords sell up, fewer rental homes are left in the market, demand stays high, supply drops and rents rise. This is already happening in several UK regions, particularly London. The result? While rental demand has been cooling, it remains well above pre-pandemic levels, sustaining continued competition for rented homes and a steady upward pressure on rents. Demand for rental properties may have settled slightly, but remains about 30% above pre-pandemic levels, 30% higher demand. Shrinking supply, basic economics, price goes up and up and up. Reason number 5, central London deprivation has skyrocketed, with income-deprived children in some neighbourhoods increasing from 8.9% to 99.9% as housing costs consume household budgets, leaving nothing for anything else. In Stamford Hill, Hackney, the proportion of children affected by income deprivation has jumped from 8.9% in 2019 to 99.9% in 2025. And this is not a one-off, from 8.9% to 99.9% in 6 years. Almost 100% of children in 73 neighbourhoods in England are living in income-deprived families. In 2019, no neighbourhood had more than 90% of children living in income deprivation. In 2025, the figure stands at 280, and in 73 neighbourhoods, 99% of children are deprived. What changed? The English Indices of Deprivation 2025. IOD 25 is more accurate than former studies because it includes the criteria of housing affordability, defined as difficulty of access to owner-occupation or the private rental market, expressed as the inability to afford to enter owner-occupation or the private rental market. When you factor in housing costs, almost every child in some London neighbourhoods lives in poverty. Office of National Statistics figures show how in the 12 months leading to December 2024, London was the English region with the highest percent rent rise, 11.5%, only slightly less than the record-breaking London rent rise, 11.6%, in the 12 months leading up to November 2024. Record-breaking rent rises, year after year. London's annual inflation has slowed but still exceeds the RPI inflation index at over 5%, and the average rent in London is the highest in England at an eye-watering £2,260 per month, over £27,000 a year. Housing costs take up the lion's share of working-class Londoners' household spending. How much as a proportion of their income workers pay for housing has a huge impact on their disposable income, and the wider impact of housing affordability is a significant driver of deprivation. Simple mathematics: if 50% of income goes to rent and 20% to bills, transport, council tax, that's 70% gone before food, clothes, or anything else. families making impossible choices. Heat or eat, pay rent or buy school uniforms. One unexpected expense means broken boiler, emergency dental work, replacement phone, and they're in crisis. London councils has previously warned that homelessness in the capital has reached record highs, with more than 1 in 50 Londoners, 183,000, homeless and living in temporary accommodation. 1 in 50 Londoners, homeless, living in temporary accommodation. With a decimated social housing sector, local authorities are relying heavily on the private rented sector to provide temporary accommodation for people made homeless. So councils pay private landlords inflated rates to house homeless families, which keeps rents high, which makes more people homeless, which forces councils to pay more for temporary accommodation. A doom spiral funded by taxpayers. Reason number 6. Despite government promises of action and new legislation to protect renters, the fundamental problem of insufficient housing supply remains completely unaddressed as building targets are missed and social housing stock continues to decline. The government passed the Renters' Rights Bill. This will end Section 21 no-fault evictions. Good for tenants who can find a rental, doesn't help anyone who can't afford rent in the first place. The Renters' Rights Bill is a big step in the right direction, but it won't solve the housing crisis on its own. More tenant protections, without more housing, equals higher rents. Because when landlords sell up, fewer rental homes are left in the market, demand stays high, supply drops and rents rise. Higher demand means higher rent, so while renters gain stronger legal protections, they may lose in affordability. A tighter market pushes prices up, and it's renters who feel it most. What about building more housing? More than 300,000 households in the city are on the social housing waiting list. The government urgently needs to tackle this crisis at its root by building more social housing and tackling the affordability crisis. Urgently needs to. Will it? The housing crisis will be the defining issue for London in 2025, and it's urgent that the government takes real, ambitious action, not just for the good of London and Londoners, but for the economic growth the government is relying on so that everyone is better off. Words, statements, urgency, no houses. Londoners believe the cost of living and housing affordability are the most important issues currently facing the capital. 56% of Londoners support building on Grey Belt. Even NIMBYs want more housing because the crisis is so severe. But building takes years. Planning, approval, construction. Meanwhile, average UK monthly private rents increased by 4.4% every year, compounding while wages rise slower. Here's where London stands in December 2025. £2,271 average monthly rent, 47.7% of wages spent on housing, 56% of income in Enfield, 75% of median pay in Westminster for one bedroom, 90,370 tenants left last year, 1 in 4 planning to leave in next 12 months, 45,000 rental properties sold in 2 years with no replacement, 99.9% of children in some neighbourhoods living in income deprivation, 183,000 people homeless and in temporary accommodation, 300,000 households on social housing waiting list, essential workers spending half their income on rent, first-time buyers fleeing the capital to buy elsewhere, landlords selling up because the economics don't work, supply shrinking while demand stays 30% above pre-pandemic, rents rising 40% while wages rise 30%, affordability at breaking point, families choosing between heating and eating, children living in deprivation, not because parents don't work but because rent consumes everything. London, the capital, the economic engine, becoming financially uninhabitable for anyone except the wealthy. Nurses can't afford to live near hospitals. Teachers can't afford to live near schools. Ambulance drivers spending 40% of income just to have somewhere to sleep between shifts, saving lives. This isn't a housing market. This is a crisis. This isn't unfortunate. This is unsustainable. Every metric screaming emergency, every statistic showing collapse. And government response? New tenancy laws, more protections, important, necessary, completely insufficient, because laws don't build houses, regulations don't create rental stock, tenant protections don't reduce rents when supply keeps shrinking and demand stays high. Britain needs houses, millions of them, social housing, private development, build to rent, any housing, all housing, fast. But fast means years, and renters don't have years. They have months, until the next rent increase, until they can't renew, until they're priced out entirely. 1 in 4 leaving within 12 months. That's 25% of London's renters. Hundreds of thousands. Where do they go? Commuter towns already overpriced. Midlands and North with fewer jobs. Back to parents if they're lucky. London is hollowing out, not of buildings, of people. The workers who make the city function pushed further and further out. Longer commutes, higher costs, lower quality of life, until they leave entirely. And London becomes a playground for the wealthy and a trap for the poor unable to escape. That's Britain, 2025, where rent has become so unbearable that hundreds of thousands flee each year, where essential workers spend half their income keeping a roof overhead, where almost every child in some neighbourhoods lives in poverty, once you factor in housing costs, where homelessness hits record highs, while rental properties are sold and not replaced, and government promises action, eventually, soon, when plans are ready, when consultations finish, when building starts, while rent rises another 4.4% this year, and another 4% next year, and another, until nobody can afford to live in Britain's capital except those who already own, one rent hike at a time.